Now it's time for another Guy Benson Show, Benson Bite, where we bring you the day's most interesting interviews in a bite-sized package. For the full episode, visit GuyBensonShow.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, joining us now is Dave Rubin, host of the popular long-form talk show, The Rubin Report, a best-selling author as well, at Rubin Report on social. Dave, welcome back.
Hi, it's good to be with you, despite all of this craziness. You know, I wish we were doing this under normal craziness, but this is, I suppose, craziness on steroids.
Yeah, this is next-level craziness. And before we skip ahead too much, you and I haven't spoken directly since Charlie was killed almost a week ago, 6 days ago. And I know we're all processing it on our own timeline. Different things hit differently. I'm just wondering how you're holding up and how you're feeling and what's on your heart right now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you starting with that. I mean, I think I'm going through a lot of probably the same emotions that you're going through, that the country's going through, except, you know, we happen to know Charlie and do events with him. And, you know, like you, Guy, I've got young kids, and now Charlie has 2 kids that won't have a father and a wife that won't have a husband. And, you know, we go, because of the nature of the 24-hour news cycle and Twitter and how everything flies so fast, you know, we go right into the political parts of this, and they are important to discuss, and we see everybody fighting on both sides and blame and all these things. But there's a human part that you just can't let go of, and I've tried to be as aware of that as possible, because it doesn't matter what anyone's politics are, it doesn't matter what their beliefs are. Like, if we start going down this path in this country, all bets are off, and we need cooler heads to prevail. And, you know, just to take the spirit of what Charlie put out there all the time, which was conversation, was agreeing to disagree. I mean, that's how Charlie and I came to know each other, because, as you know, I was on the left and he was on the right, and we wanted to do college tours where we would debate these issues. And, you know, to Charlie's credit, I happened to evolve a lot closer to his positions than he came to mine, although I think I did move him on some things or make him think differently in some ways. But that's the spirit that we need to embrace right now. I think that's really the best way that we can honor him.
How do we do that?
Well, there's the billion-dollar question, my friend. I mean, look, we know that broadly on the right, especially over the last couple of years, the MAGA movement has become a true wide tent movement. It's why people that were literally, in the case of RFK Jr., running as a candidate to be president from the Democrat side 2 years ago, is now part of the Trump cabinet. It's why someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democrat senator, is now part of MAGA. It's why Elon Musk came around. It's why I came around. It's why Joe Rogan came around. All of these things. What Charlie represented, I think, is what the best of what America is. Charlie had his own personal, religious, philosophical views that framed his life and the way he wanted to live, and he wanted to share those with other people. But he understood that America is not a theocracy, that it is great. It is the greatest experiment of all time, with 50 million people sitting in it who are not going to do all the same things all the time, but we have to at least unite under the banner of what free is and understand what the foundation of our country is. And you can figure out how you want to live with that. And that's going to be the tricky part, because we do have, I would say, a political party that has completely abandoned those ideals. We have a radical wing of the party that I would say has completely taken over the party, that is deeply anti-American, a media that's been completely dereliction of duty throughout all of this, and we have an algorithm that is breaking the minds of young people. So you take a kid like Tyler Robinson, who by all accounts came from a decent family, not a broken home or anything like that, and could be radicalized really within 2 years into a really horrific ideology. So the how is going to be the tricky part, and I think it's incumbent on guys like us who communicate this stuff for a living to figure out what those avenues are.
You know, Dave, you mentioned that Charlie had said that America is not a theocracy. He made that point a lot, especially when coming under criticism from people on the much farther right who were criticizing him and attacking him for associating with people, frankly, like us, specifically. In fact, there's a clip that's gone very viral this week of Charlie getting challenged about welcoming gay people into the conservative movement and at Turning Point events and that sort of thing. And Charlie made a very eloquent, pluralistic defense of the country and of the movement. And he talked about how there's a difference between his religious views and how he lives his life versus what a political movement needs to look like in a society, a secular political movement, which is not to say there's no room for God. Of course, that's not the case. But he invoked both of our names in that exchange with that person. And it was sent to me by a lot of people. And I did share it, not because I wanted to highlight Charlie mentioning my name or your name, but because one of the reasons that people are excusing his murder, or at least making some argument that maybe he deserved what he got with that horrible assassination was, on the list of thought crimes is homophobe. And I wanted to amplify that clip because it truly flies in the face of that smear that's been directed at him. And I actually had a buddy of mine who's definitely on the left who had not really spent almost any time engaging with Charlie Kirk content or his ideas. He watched that clip because I shared it, and he was just astonished at how Charlie handled himself during that whole exchange, and effectively wrote to me, paraphrasing, "Oh wow, the cartoon version that they are painting of this man really isn't true. It's just another lie." And I said, yeah, right? I think that clip helps illustrate that point.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting, Guy, because I hadn't seen that clip until yesterday, even though apparently he did, mention me and you. And I watched it, and I thought, man, this is really, I retweeted it because it really represented the best of what Charlie is. Charlie wanted a wide tent movement for conservative values, but understood that not everyone will agree exactly with him on certain philosophical or religious notions. So Charlie and I were able to debate all the time, do each other's shows. Charlie opened for me during my book tour in Arizona. We were able to become friends and have him come to my house and sit next to me and my husband with him and his wife at a wedding not too long ago and talk about all of these things. Now, did Charlie want I don't even want, it almost seems crazy to have to be talking about this now, but did Charlie really want same-sex marriage per se? Well, from his own religious perspective, he did not. But did he also understand that because he did not want America to be a theocracy, just as our founders did not, that he was going to have to find a way? There's also a beautiful moment where, in another video that went viral, where a young gay person asks him about could he be part of the movement, and Charlie
played this clip here.
Yeah, and Charlie absolutely says yes and explains all of that, and that and he says something nice about how your sexuality is just one of the degrees of things that you are, and unfortunately the left has convinced a lot of people to think that these immutable characteristics are the most important thing, when in many cases they're either the least important thing or they're just somewhere within the mix of what we all are. So Charlie, that's also the interesting piece of Charlie, because while so many people are painting him as this extremist, not only was he welcoming new people into the movement, but he was also pushing away the actual extremists, right? So the people who want America to be a theocracy, which it will never be and can never be for a litany of reasons, he was actually keeping them at bay. People talk about the Groypers and all of these. These were the people that were the sort of neo-Nazi movement online. These were the people that were attending Turning Point events to protest Charlie. They hated Charlie. So Charlie was hated by the far left and the far right, probably more than anyone else. A lot of us get hate from these groups, but Charlie, because he represented something so strong with young people, was really getting the bulk of that hate, and that also is why losing him right now puts such pressure on all of us to be a little bit better right now, because as you know, people are going to be out there trying to grab the mantle of what he created and take it in their own direction.
Dave, I saw that you reacted the same way that I did to some comments this week by the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi. And I wanted to tear my hair out watching some of these clips. This is one of them, cut 3.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people, so we show them that some action is better than no action.
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything, and that's across the aisle.
Dave, she also, in a different interview, was talking about how you can't decline to print certain posters in honor of Charlie Kirk, which is something that we saw, I believe, at an Office Depot, and those employees were identified and then fired. But Pam Bondi is talking here about the force of the government. And forever we've been talking about, and Charlie Kirk very explicitly was a top messenger on this, actually hate speech, which is this nebulous subjective construct and concept, is not unconstitutional. Violence and threats, of course, is illegal, but it is not unconstitutional, it is not illegal to engage in what some people might view, or many people might view, as hate speech. That is one of the tenets of free speech, and she's kind of making the exact opposite argument here, and then also effectively making the bake the cake argument that we've seen from the left in a place like Colorado. We have spent so much time, and Charlie spent so much time, pushing back against that, and it just seemed like such a clumsy pander and embrace of this illiberal government abuse approach to speech, and it looks like she has retreated a little bit, and she's clarified, I was talking about threats. If she has backed away from what she said, then good, but I think it is so important for people on the right in particular to say, no, we've been fighting against this very idea and trying to pander to our emotions right now, which are raw because of what happened to Charlie. That is not the way to go.
Right. Well, one of the things that I think has been nice about this in the 24 hours since the clip of her saying that went viral is how many people on the right pushed back. You know, one of the things over the years with the left is the crazier the left went, nobody was there. There were, well, I would say there were a small group of a few people at one time, the old school liberals who tried to push back and it didn't work, but there weren't enough of us. As it pertains to the right now, there was a huge pushback on her, and then yes, she issued basically a clarification on Twitter where the issue is that she again used the phrase hate speech, and as you pointed out, it's a completely amorphous term that actually the Supreme Court in 1969 decided that there's no such thing as hate speech. Yes, can you say horrible things about people? Guy, I have no doubt that you get all the pleasant comments I get on X all day long. Do I want those people jailed for their speech? No. But there is a difference. I mean, the things that are not protected by the First Amendment, like actual direct calls to violence, or an action, which of course is not speech. So in her retraction, she wrote hate speech again, and I think the reason that was so triggering, for lack of a better term, for so many people was that this is exactly what's happening across the pond in the UK right now, where they quite literally are arresting people because they say something about they don't want illegal immigrants or whatever it might be, and we don't want that. So we have the First Amendment for a reason. I hope that now, having seen the pushback, she understands that we cannot go down that road. If people want to say odious things about Charlie posthumously or about us while we are here, they're allowed to do it. But when you directly call for violence, that's different. You know, we played a clip on my show today. There's this guy, Hassan Piker, who is one of the top streamers on Twitch, and he has repeatedly called for people to be murdered in the streets and blood in the streets. Literally, those are his words.
By the way, just to jump in, Hassan Piker, because I think our audience might be vaguely familiar with him. We've talked about him a little bit here. He routinely calls for violence in many ways. He's talked about wanting to see Rick Scott killed. He has suggested that Tom Cotton, both U.S. senators, should be killed. He retweeted a homemade gun diagram in response to a Tom Cotton tweet. Mary Catherine Ham, a very dear friend of mine, she will check in on what he's up to from time to time, and she said, oh yeah, he's calling for violence frequently. Here's one example on his show, just one of many, cut 11.
Kill them. Kill those motherfuckers and murder those motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets soak in their red capitalist bloods, dude.
Here's another one, cut 12.
I'm sick and tired of it. Left-wingers, liberals, you need to be showing your opponent's guts on there, okay? You need to be gutting them. You need to be shanking these motherfuckers and letting their intestines just ride on stage What the is this man? Slice him up. Slice him and dice him.
Now, Dave, I do not ingest the content of this man virtually ever. I know that the hard left loves him. He's been a huge pro-Palestine hero to them. They've written a bunch of glowing profiles of him in the New York Times, and I believe, Rolling Stone or one of those prestige, quote-unquote, magazines recently saying, oh, maybe this is the left's answer to the Joe Rogans and then the Charlie Kirks of the world. The New York Times went rushing to Hassan Piker to give him an op-ed to write after Charlie was killed because they were scheduled to debate one another. And it was this one-sided op-ed that he wrote saying what I would have said to Charlie at our debate. It's like this was a non-rebutted piece of Hassan just to say what he believed, fine. But what a bizarre impulse from the New York Times. The clips that you just played, from my understanding, are not terribly unrepresentative of the way that he engages in speech. And to see mainstream left of center publications glorifying this man and holding him up as some sort of key voice for their future, I think is concerning.
Well, Guy, I mean, he quite literally was campaigning with Mamdani in New York City just a couple of weeks ago. There are pictures up that Mamdani posted himself. Those things that he said right there are direct calls for violence. I want their blood in the streets. This is what he wants to happen to capitalists. That's me. That's you. That's everybody listening to this show right now. So there's two issues here, because there is the protected First Amendment issue around this, right, which clearly he's blurring the line on. I mean, that's not even blurring the line. He's blurring the line is when you say globalize the Intifada, which does mean kill all Jews wherever they are. That would be a blurring. He's jumping right over the line because he's saying kill them, so it's not even a blurring.
Let the streets soak in their bleeping red capitalist blood.
Right. So that's as pretty much literal as you can get to say kill those people, right? That's not protected free speech, so perhaps Pam Bondi will look into that. But I would say the other portion of that, when it comes to incitement, is Twitch itself, which, from what I understand, he's making over $200,000 a month on right now. That's over $2 million a year, and it's just one of many revenue avenues. They have terms of service. Why are they allowed? There is no doubt you are not allowed to call for murder on their terms of service, not only because it breaks the laws of the United States, but it just fundamentally is in every platform's terms of service. So why are they allowing him on there? This is what, if the government is going to start looking into things as it pertains to it, this is the type of thing. Twitch seems to be under pressure right now. I haven't heard anyone say anything about this. But again, this is, when you look at, I'm sure you saw the YouGov poll about the amount of 25% of, basically lefties, young lefties, believe that violence is okay. Well, this should not surprise us. What have we seen for the last 2 years post-October 7th? Absolute calls for genocide and violence and stopping certain students from coming onto campus and taking over campuses and all of these things. This is just the next extension. We saw a group of people who celebrated when a healthcare executive was executed in the middle of Times Square. So all of these things are connected. And as I'm sure you've been pointing out on your show, there is no symmetry here. It is not to say there aren't a couple of bad apples on the right that say, stupid things and the rest of it. But the right does not do this. The right, generally speaking, does not believe that politics is be-all, end-all, and the final decider in the most important issues of the day. There is something above that for most people on the right. And these things are simply not equal, and we can't fall into the trap of every time somebody of one of our people gets attacked or killed or whatever, suddenly being like, oh, but we kind of do it too. It's an absolute false dichotomy.
Yeah, and another example of this, and I want to get your take on, there is a fairly well-known online left-wing personality who I had never heard of, frankly, but I know he has a huge following, named Dean Withers. And he had interacted with Charlie, knew him a little bit personally. They clashed on basically everything, disagreed on almost everything. And when Dean Withers found out that Charlie had been shot through the neck and murdered last week, he broke down in tears on his show. He cried. He was horrified and he was bereft. And then a few days later, he had to put out a statement, a lengthy video, in order to deal with the backlash that he got from his audience and from a lot of his peers on the hardcore online left. I'm not smearing or painting with too broad of a brush all Democrats, all left of center people. That's not true. There are many, many people of goodwill who reside on the political left. But as you said, there is this sizable chunk of the hardcore left that is explicitly pro-murder, pro-violence at this point. And this young guy, Dean Withers, got enormous blowback from his people, basically, for shedding tears over Charlie Kirk. And this was used to bludgeon him, rhetorically, metaphorically, saying, how can you possibly cry for this? And then all the epithets, homophobic, fascist, transphobe, blah, 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 to the point that he had to address those concerns and those attacks. Here's a little taste of it, cut 13.
In the last 24 hours or so, I've received a lot of public scrutiny and backlash in response to the fact that yesterday, after Charlie Kirk died, I cried, and then the video of me crying was blasted all over the internet. So first and foremost, I am distraught because of what happened to Kirk. I think that gun violence is always wrong, and I also think that violence leads to more violence. In fact, today we've already had 3 HBCUs go into lockdown because of retaliatory threats in response to what happened to Kirk. And that's my position. That's how I feel. But I'm going to be honest, that on its own isn't what invoked the extreme and raw emotional reaction of tears that you guys saw that I'm now being criticized so heavily for.
Being criticized so heavily for crying that a young husband and father had just been murdered in cold blood because of his opinions. I mean, that says something about the milieu in which you operate if you need to talk to your audience. He didn't apologize, to his credit, but he did feel compelled to explain why he cried, and he walked through those reasons, and then he finished by saying, and by the way, just because I cried doesn't mean that you have to feel the same way, sort of like, oh, you know, if you want to be a much, much worse person, by all means, that's your right. I just think the fact that this video needed to be made at all is illustrative and also disturbing along the lines that we've been talking about here.
I mean, Guy, if I could loosely quote Friedrich Nietzsche, you know, if you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss might just stare back. And I think that that's what this guy saw. You know, so many people on the left have tacitly or implicitly condoned violence for so long. They've made sure that they're so morally right while we're all so evil and Nazis and everything else, that they've ginned up a generation, as we just illustrated with the YouGov poll, that is okay with these actions. So then when he has I don't know this person specifically, so I'm just commenting on what I've heard here, but when one of these people suddenly has a little light bulb moment, oh my God, maybe my audience has become really radicalized because I keep calling everyone Nazis or whatever it might be. Well, suddenly they realize what's next. Now the audience is going to turn on them. This is something I've been warning about for years as someone that was on the left. I saw this happen all the time. People would start waking up, and then they would realize, oh my, the tactics I've used on those scary right-wingers is now going to be used on me. And it keeps a certain set of people in that kind of cowardly, silent chamber. So I would say to him, good luck. Good luck. What are you going to do now with a base of an audience that is more radical than you? And this is exactly why, Guy, you probably saw it when I went on Piers Morgan on Friday, and my former colleague, Cenk Uygur, was calling for peace, and all I did to him was read back 10 of his YouTube titles about Charlie, and then 10 others about Trump, repeatedly calling him Nazi and fascist and all of these things. And he started screaming and calling me a monster and all of these things. And it's like, dude, I can get on board peace, and let's figure out how to move forward together as a country and all that. But not unless you're going to have a mea culpa first. I said to him, what do you think about these titles? And he started screaming and bloviating and all the rest of it. And I think this is what we're up against right now. Is it possible that there is a moment right now where we can bring in so many good people who are waking up because of the exact things that you and I are talking about right now? Of course. But there has to be a moment of reflection, of mea culpa. There has to be a moment of honesty and self-reflection. Otherwise, it's, oh my God, now all the guns, so to speak, are being turned on me, so let me abandon all my previous positions. And there's no integrity in that.
Yeah, well, Cenk does a lot of screaming indignantly, self-righteously all the time when there's often very little righteousness to be defending at all there. And what worries me about this episode and putting out this explanation video, imagine having to explain to your own fans why you cried when someone was murdered. I wonder if this would have a chilling effect moving forward. We've seen this on the Israel issue too, for example. Like, on the left, it is basically verboten to be pro-Israel without expecting a giant backlash. So a lot of the people who don't actually stand firm in that belief, they have gotten awfully quiet because they are captured by their base, captured by the audience. They're afraid of these people in terms of losing their support or beyond. And I think there is some risk of this, quote, on both sides, but we're seeing it very dramatically on the left right now. And I just wonder how many people on the left in the future are just like, okay, well, we can't be for Israel anymore against a Hamas terrorist organization. And now is one of the litmus tests of being a really good, hard leftist or democratic socialist or whatever they want to call themselves. You can't mourn murders of people that you disagree with. How many people making a living in this space or pursuing office on that side will say, well, maybe I really shouldn't say how I'm feeling about this because I don't want to anger and inflame my own people. I mean, that is about as demented a litmus test as I can possibly envision.
Well, Guy, let me just say this to finish. Look, it's far worse than that, actually, because imagine if Bernie Sanders or any of these lefties got on stage and opened a speech with saying, America's the greatest country in the world, capitalism is great, freedom is wonderful. They'd be booed off the stage, right? They'd be next on the list for these people. So it's not just that they're subtly condoning violence against us. It's that they now own their own radical leadership. And unfortunately, these people are not good at looking in the mirror. I wish they would, but unfortunately, they're not.
Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report. Check that out. Buy his books. Follow him on social at Rubin Report. Dave, thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, guys.